Welcome to the Pivot Experience podcast, where leadership transformation isn't just a concept, it's a journey we take together. This is where real leaders share real stories about the moments that changed everything. In each episode, we dive deep into the pivotal experiences that transformed good leaders into great ones. Whether you're a seasoned executive, a rising star in your organization, or someone ready to take that next big step in your leadership journey, you're in the right place. Get ready to learn, grow, and maybe even find that spark that ignites your own leadership pivot. This is the Pivot Experience podcast, where your next breakthrough starts here.
The recording started. Excellent. All right, guys, welcome to another Lead Better. My name is Alex Seal, and I am with the Pivot Experience, and I'm so excited to have so many new and fresh faces on the line with us today. We have a very, very special meeting and session planned for you guys today. We are fortunate enough to have a participant of the LDP program and someone who is currently in the coop, Bryan Baldwin, and we're going to give him a lot of runway and to introduce himself. But before we do that, we've got a few housekeeping things already in the chat, and you guys get used to using that chat functionality. We should be asking you where you are joining us from. So please do us a favor and go ahead and put in the chat where are you joining us from. I would also be curious to know, how did you hear about this event? And so if you would indulge me in saying, how did you come to become aware of this event, and where you're from in the chat for me as well. And I want to go ahead and introduce the people here that make the Pivot Experience work. Without these individuals, this company would fail miserably. And so I want to acknowledge some people. I've got on the line, first of all, Giovanna Roach. If you guys follow us on LinkedIn or any social media platforms, you had to have seen this person's face plastered all over our platform, just giving us nuggets of wisdom. Giovanna has worked for the world's most caring company now for almost 25 years. Jokingly said that she's silver in the Chick-fil-A world, but she is more than that. She's, in her words, still young and gunning. You know, that was a little informal, but that's her words, and that's where she still feels like she is operating at. And so she does a lot with LDP communication skills. She is also not only helping people with communication, but she also helps leaders get better with things in their restaurant and them becoming a better leader personally. We also have Neff Franco, who I like to call him our Swiss Army knife when it comes to tech, when it comes to just different things that the business needs. I know Neff is someone that we can count on. He is also our bilingual coach, and so we offer coaching in Spanish. So for those of you who have team members or you yourself are a ESL individual, Neff is here to help you get that Spanish speaking coaching that you need for you or someone in your restaurant. We also have Ashley Allison here. First of all, I have the pleasure of working with her in my home restaurant here. She's been with Chick-fil-A now 8 years. And we are just happy to have her as one of the stronger administrative arms here at TPE. She also specializes in connecting the younger generation with us older folks who try to hang out with the younger people. And so she does a great job with us there. And also newly acquired skill. I say newly acquired. She has been really dabbling in the marketing field. And so I definitely think that if you have any marketing questions, Ashley Allison will be somebody to speak with. And then last but certainly not least, we've got the newest guy here at TPE, who is Abram. He is currently in the coop himself. And so he's not in the coop, I apologize. He's in the interview process. He just finished his virtuals. He's going to get ready to have his in-person interviews. And so, no, we're definitely glad to have Abram. He's been around, I believe, almost 11 years now. And so cumulatively, we all have approximately 60 years of Chick-fil-A experience that we just love to leverage on the behalf of you guys to be able to help you get better. As I already mentioned, this is Lead Better. And Lead Better is our free monthly virtual offering where we host different people from the Chick-fil-A world, or just different coaches, different leaders in general, to be able to, for them to share their perspective on what they do. And so, and today is no different. As I mentioned already, we have somebody by the name of Bryan Baldwin. He comes to us by strong recommendation of the Allison family, and we're glad to have you on today. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Glad to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Oh, for sure. And so we've got a tradition here that we've been doing at Lead Better for quite some time, and we're not going to break that tradition. We're just going to upgrade and enhance that tradition because we've been using the same set of words. For those of you who have attended a Lead Better in the past, it's been we have this thing called tug of war, and so we're about to do tug of war with you, and I've got a fresh new set of words, and so these words are going to land on you, going to land on the coaches and all the participants. We're going to see if these words are as good as the words that we used to use before. And you know, and our silver member is going to let us know whether or not those words are well or not. So, are you ready to play tug of war, Bryan?
Absolutely.
All right. So, the first set of words. Now, again, let me be fair and say that you have to pick one of these words, right? In the ideal world, you would love to be able to make sure. I'm sure both of these are alive and well in the organizations that you have the chance to lead. But for the sake of this game, you got to pick one. You got to tell me why you want to pick one. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So the first set of words: confidence or humility.
For that one, I choose humility.
Okay.
I choose humility because I feel like that's where more of my strong suits are. Leading through humility. I don't tend to take credit as a leader. Actually, as I meet with coaches, I've been coached to try to speak with more confidence and to take more credit for things than than I normally do. I just feel like it's super important to for the team to see a leader as humble, because if they see them as humble, then they feel like they're a part of that team. It's not you don't get those team members that feel like I was the one that did all the work and I received zero credit, right? So it's like, yes, like I'm leading the restaurant, but in the day to day, like it's my team members who are grinding day in and day out and leading those CM scores and leading the speed of service and leading food quality and food safety, right? So like, yes, like I'm the guy with the name on the restaurant, but it's really the team that is doing the heavy lifting.
Awesome. I love that answer. Love the answer. Are we tracking good so far, silver member? We're doing good so far.
Yes. I'm just sad I don't know what these words are, because I'm like, every time I'm like stressed. What's he gonna say? Hold on real quick though. I was listening to a podcast today. I'm going walks, and that's kind of how I like de-stress. And it was a Craig Rochelle, I think it's his newest podcast that he just came out, and he was talking about transparency, and that's kind of what it made me think of, is like that. A lot of times really confident leaders, I would consider myself pretty a confident leader, right? But I think that doesn't get you to where you want to go when it comes to trust. And so to me, like with humility, when you are a humble leader, you can be transparent, and that's what's going to gain trust with your team. So I don't know. I just thought about humility and transparency together.
Love that. All right. Next set of words. Okay. Vision versus execution.
All right. That's a good one. I'm going to choose vision. So I choose vision because I believe that's the foundation for execution. Because if you execute without having vision, then you're not really moving towards anything. You're just kind of there. But if you have a vision, you're leading your team, you're with your team. And so that vision is what's going to motivate and inspire others to follow the path that you're wanting the restaurant to follow.
No, love that. This set of words kind of reminds me of one of my favorite Denzel Washington quotes. He says, "Don't confuse movement with progress." And so if you're executing at a high level, you can be making a whole lot of movement, but you might not be making progress. So I love that. Very good. Hopefully we're 2 for 2 here. All right. Next set of questions. Next set of words, I'm sorry. Courage or wisdom?
That's a good one too. I'm gonna go with my gut instinct, and that was courage. Because in the restaurant business, it's full of risk, right? There's a lot of risk involved with the restaurant. Not necessarily just bad risk, like there can be good risk, right? Like decisions between two good decisions, right? It's going to come with consequences for both actions, right? But it takes a lot of courage, I believe, to lead that restaurant with humility, right? Or to it takes a lot of courage to lead others along the path that you're also on, right? So yes, like wisdom's also required, but in this case, courage is what's going to help you make those first steps, right? You have that 10 seconds of bravery, right? You're like, oh my gosh, what I do? You just got to jump in, right? Cold plunge, right? Just jump in and go from there. So, and that's what's really going to kind of accelerate it, because if you just wait around, I think we've all kind of been opportunities like that. We're like, oh, like, I don't really know, if you're thinking about LDP, you're just like, I don't really know if it's the right thing. I don't really, there's a lot of good things, a lot of bad things, but it's really that courage that's going to like push you. And then that's when that snowball effect happens.
Awesome. I love that. All right. Next set of words: urgency or patience?
That's a good one.
Alex, you're taking Bryan down today. Hey, we put our partner to give you these crazy words.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with patience. Urgency is really important, but if you think in the long run, patience, my transition lead. So for those of you not in LDP, a transition lead is kind of like an operations lead for an operator. He's the guy who is from corporate and oversees the restaurant, oversees the interim managers running the restaurant. He tells us to go slow, then smooth, then fast, right? So what it's doing is you're building muscle memory, you're building habits, you're building tendencies in the team members. And so you want to have patience with those team members, because learning takes patience, right? Creating muscle memory and habits take patience. They're going to make mistakes. They're not going to do what you ask them to do the first 3 or 4 or 5 times that you have to do it. But eventually, things start to click, right? As they're slow and they're learning, then it becomes smooth, right? And then like your patiences can slowly turn into urgency as you're able to push them towards that next step.
Love that. Love that. And here we go. We're almost done. Hopefully we're 4 for 4. I think we're 4 for 4 so far.
Awesome.
We got one more.
I didn't know there was right or wrong answers.
No. There isn't. This is all interpretation. And like I said in the beginning of this, in the ideal world, you would like to have both of these running.
Right, exactly.
Both of each of these items running together, but the pinch of the exercise is to kind of put you into a corner and force you to choose one. Okay, and this one should be easy. I think you should be in and out of there on this one. Okay,
right.
I think clarity or flexibility.
I'm gonna choose clarity. Yeah. Clarity, because it's important for even yourself. It's important to know the why, right? Like if you've ever tried to follow someone or do something and the instructions aren't very clear, or your purpose isn't very clear, the energy you put into that activity or into that responsibility is not going to be nearly as much as if you know exactly what to do, or if you know exactly why you're doing it, right? So I want to emphasize those two things, because in LDP, you're often put into situations of not knowing how to do things, and the instructions aren't very clear, but you know why you're doing it, right? Like the role is clear and you know the why, and so that makes it that much easier to move forward with that task.
Awesome. So I appreciate you braving these words.
Happy to do it.
I will tell you this, and unfairly to you, I've sent these words out early ahead of time, sometimes just to give the person, but I'll say, well, where he's at, I think he can handle it. I think he's
Some
done.
candid responses are nice every now and then, right? So,
I agree. I agree. And so before we jump into the questions that we have, can you just give and we did this before we started the call. Abram asked a very good question. What's your Chick-fil-A journey? What's your Chick-fil-A story up until this point? And so if you can give us a snapshot of what that is for the audience, so they can know who you are.
Absolutely. So I've been with Chick-fil-A for almost 10 years. So it'll be 10 years in October. So I started in restaurant Chick-fil-A Lassiter in Marietta, Georgia in October of 2015. My very first day was that restaurant's grand opening. So that was my operator, Scott Reed's second restaurant. And very quickly just fell in love with the brand. I had never worked fast food before. My previous job that I had held was a party coordinator for Catch-Air Marietta. So it's like a nice, fun kid party place. And I loved just like the service-oriented mindset that Chick-fil-A had. The ability to serve the guests and the emphasis on people and care, right? It just aligned so much with my values that, from a few months in, I decided that I wanted to be an operator. I wanted to be that person that had that influence on the community. So I quickly, moved up into leadership at Chick-fil-A Lassiter, worked there for about a year and a half, switched over to my operator's second restaurant at Chick-fil-A Sprayberry, which is about 5 minutes down the road. Worked a variety of positions, anywhere from, supervisor, kitchen supervisor, front of house, doing schedule, ordering truck. When I got married in April of 2020, I moved to Rome and worked at a Truett's Grill in Rome for a time. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the full capacity of the Truett's Grill because COVID still had the dining rooms down. But it was still really fun to, cook sweet potato souffle and fried okra and just normal things, just different things that you don't really ever get to do. But I served as a training coordinator for Truett's Grill. So I did all onboarding and training for brand new front of house employees. So I was in charge of their training for the first 2 weeks. And I also helped implement and create a leadership pipeline for that restaurant. So they didn't really have any way for team members to move up. So I helped create a system to do that for the team members. It was around this time that I kind of took a break from Chick-fil-A and was searching elsewhere. I was searching elsewhere for other opportunities. I didn't really know if being in the restaurant industry was something I wanted to do, especially as I was thinking about growing my family. I wanted to find something that maybe wasn't as time consuming as being in the restaurant industry. So I actually took an internship with Target for a time. So about 10 weeks, it was about a 10-week internship with Target. And quite frankly, it was during this time that I kind of felt a lack in my leadership development, felt very underutilized. Target was a lot slower paced than Chick-fil-A. So there's a lot of standing around, a lot of kind of pacing and just kind of figuring out what to do. It was at this time too that my wife and I found out that we were pregnant with twins. So they were going to be our first kids. So we decided to go big or go home. And we started with twins. And that was really what kind of lit a fire in me. My wife and I discussed, and that was really what pushed us back to Chick-fil-A. So I went back and worked with Scott Reed and joined his LDP launch program. At this time I was driving an hour to and from work every day. So there's plenty of Chick-fil-A's in between that I could have chose, but I chose him because I knew he had the best opportunities for me to get into LDP. Served as a kitchen director and operations director for Chick-fil-A Sprayberry, and then this operations director at Chick-fil-A Lassiter. And then eventually I got into LDP in June of 2023. And that's where I've been. I've been in 4 different states. So I started training in New Jersey. My first official assignment in LDP was a 3-story inline in downtown Chicago at Michigan Avenue. And then I was actually in Texas for a time in Humble, Texas, which is north of Houston. I was at a cook-up front mall at Deerbrook Mall. And then I've been in Georgia for a little over a year now. So I've done 3 assignments in Georgia. So we've been blessed to have been around family for so long.
Well, you've been in our neck of the woods a little bit. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, Deerbrook, yeah, that's close to home for some of us. And so thank you so much for that. You know, my head starts spinning when I hear people say they have twins. And so your leadership, that's a leadership development tool within itself for sure. You know, raising one child from birth is one thing, raising two at the same time and your first time.
It's better to start with zero expectations.
Wow. Yeah. So no, we're about to get ready to get into the questions. I love that you guys are already using the chat function. Please put any questions, anything that sticks out to you during the course of this conversation, put it in the chat. We love to highlight those things. And if you have any questions, either we'll address them mid conversation or we'll wait till the end of the talk to do so. And so Bryan, you are in LDP, and I know a lot of people on the line are really interested in the process of LDP or learning from someone who has had experience there. And I think you said something that really stuck out to me, and I'm starting to learn, and I've heard from other people who are in LDP, is that, hey, this thing isn't structured. This isn't like they don't have it, you know, A, B, C, you know, they give you the tools to be able to go do it, but you're really out there in the field figuring things out. And I want to know, first of all, like, what is one pivotal moment for you that you've had during this LDP process that challenged you the most, and how did you respond to it?
Great question, because it was really hard to choose one pivotal moment, because there's multiple pivotal moments in LDP. So I actually had, if you don't mind me just sharing two real quick, because it kind of affects me in a couple different ways. So the first one challenged me a little bit more as an operator. So in Cumming, Georgia, I re-grand opened a restaurant as a core restaurant. So a core restaurant is a company operated restaurant. Those are the ones that interim managers lead at. And so this restaurant went through a remodel stage. The operator retired, and I took over during the latter end of the remodel and had to assume responsibility of all the legality from the previous team members to meeting with vendors and general contractors and finishing construction for the restaurant, and in hiring about 150 team members to re-grand open the restaurant. And to be quite frank with you, I'd never done that before.
And may I ask this question? Was this your first assignment? Like, which assignment was
no,
this?
It's not. This one was, let's see. This one was my fourth assignment.
Okay, so
I had gotten a phone call. So this is about how it went down. I got a phone call, and they told me that I was on vacation at the time. And they called me and told me when I came back, I would be at a different restaurant because I needed to be up there as soon as possible. So it was just really quick. And this restaurant was about a $12 million restaurant, which for the state of Georgia is extremely high. And that really challenged me a lot professionally, because in this restaurant, you know, the food safety score averaged at about 8 for the past year. It had previously had like a really bad like rat infestation. Equipment was falling apart. So it wasn't just like a remodel. It was like, holy smokes, like this restaurant's in a terrible state, and I've got to pick it up and go with it, right? And so it was very fast paced, right? It's like very much like, hey, like hit the ground running, set the expectations of food safety. 80% of my team are brand new to Chick-fil-A. I did have the privilege of onboarding, you know, some of the previous team that had worked with that restaurant, but I had very minimal leadership, no upper level leadership, all, you know, basic, you know, shift leads and team leads. Managed for our next 2 quarters to get a food safety score of a 2. You know, like quality improvement visit scores of a 99. I mean, it was just, sure, our speed of service wasn't super high because brand new team. But again, kind of with those foundations, right? You're getting them the foundations of, hey, we're going to serve, you know, great quality food, and we're going to serve it in a very clean restaurant and in a healthy manner. And so that was just really stressful, because that was my first like big assignment, like high volume, very visible on the corporate side. So there was a lot of eyes on this restaurant. So there was a lot of pressure from that end for me to do well at that assignment. And so that takes me to my current assignment at Chick-fil-A Roswell Corners, where it was very physically demanding. Now the other one was physically demanding, but not nearly as physically demanding as Roswell Corners. So this is when we took over this restaurant, the operator that had the restaurant took about 70 of his team members. It was an $8.5 million restaurant. We were kept with 20 to 25 part-time, nighttime team members. So we didn't have any back house or front of house daytime employees. And we essentially staffed it with FTS trainers. For the first month and a half or so, I was probably working 70 to 80 hours a week, all in position, grinding, just trying to keep the store afloat. Right, we had the dining room closed. We closed 2 hours earlier than we would have, and we were just barely hanging on. It felt like nothing we did was making any sort of impact to the restaurant. No matter how many people we hired, it didn't feel like we had enough people. And eventually we made it over that hump. I chose those two experiences because it showed me how much I was capable of doing under pressure. Right. So it's really when you're tested and when you're kind of thrown into the fire that you see how much you can withstand. And you really kind of see, I mean, honestly, it shines a light on everything, not even just your strengths. It shines a light definitely on your areas of opportunity as well. But it was like those were pivotal because it gave me confidence in knowing, hey, if I was an operator who got a brand new restaurant, like I can do it, right? Like that's something I can do, right? And now I have that mindset and that experience from LDP to know, hey, we may not be perfect the first month or the first 3 months or the first 8 months, right? But are we getting incrementally better, right? Like, are we pursuing excellence every single day and every single month? So those are the two experiences that I chose.
So for those of you who are on the line looking for what does this program offer, what's it going to be like being in the program, I think you probably heard some of the, I don't want to use the word extreme, but some very high pressure situations, to first of all, and I don't want to prolong this too long, but to walk into a $12 million situation that has an 8 food safety score, you would think at that volume that is shored up. You would think, but as we know, the busier the store is, the more out of control those variables could get. And so we think that volume solves everything or volume fixes everything. Obviously not. And so to walk into that, and I think this is going to be a perfect segue into our next question, because you said in Roswell you work 70, 80 hours. At this other situation, I'm sure you may not wasn't as physically engaged, but I'm sure your time was still spent. We already established that you have twins. And by the way, we didn't even mention the wife, right? We got the wife had to be there in order for the twins to be there. How are you balancing? How are you balancing all of this, like tension, pressure, and stress? Because hold on, for us, we might have situations similar to that, but my performance is measured by my operator, but this is literally going on your resume. This is literally like to make or break whether or not you're going to continue to advance. You're going to have to figure out how to, one, address this, and then number two, how did you tell the story of this? So there's a lot of pressure there. So how do you balance all that? Like, how do you continue to build healthy relationships with your family while doing this? Because I'm sure you're not the only person who are having to deal with the family aspect of it and the performance aspect of it.
Right. I appreciate you asking. I failed to mention I actually have a third kid too. He was born last July, so I've traveled with 3 kids. The twins are 3.5, and then I have a 1-year-old. So my wife, please forgive me for forgetting to mention that. So,
we didn't give you the room to mention that, number one, and number two. Obviously, them 2 didn't stop you, so I guess it wasn't too bad of a
They're a blessing. They're a blessing. So it's a great question because there are seasons where I feel like I do this really well, and there are seasons where I feel like balancing it is impossible. So as I was pondering about this, it's important to know that I'm a leader of 3 groups. Right, I'm a leader first of my family, first and foremost. I'm a leader of my wife and my kids. The next one, I'm a leader of my restaurant. Wherever my assignment is, like I'm the leader. at that restaurant, I take responsibility of that. And the third group is the one that I tend to forget the most, and is that I'm a leader of myself. And so I mentioned these three because it's not just your family and the restaurant that you're balancing, but it's your family's needs and your professional career's needs, but also your needs that you're trying to balance all at the same time. And to be like very upfront, I'm not the best example. I'm still in the learning stages of how to balance this, right? Because every situation's a new situation. And I think one key word for this is intentionality, right? Being intentional with my wife and communicating, hey, this is going to be a really intense assignment upcoming. A lot of times we're at least made aware of kind of some of the things that might be happening in the restaurant, that kind of gives us an idea of what our work is going to look like. So just being upfront and say, hey, you may not see me for a little while, right? Because work is going to require a lot out of me this next month or two, right? Just being really intentional about that. And then when you're home, being really intentional about trying to be as present as possible at home, right? That's something I struggle with from time to time, especially when the restaurant is in a chaos state, or as we like to call it in LDP, a triage state. You come home and it's like your brain is still at the restaurant. It's still on, hey, how do I dig myself out of this mess, right? And it's very hard to be able to be present in that moment. And then all at the same time, you're trying to make the restaurant better, and you're trying to make your wife and kids as comfortable as possible in the living situations that you're in, that you tend to forget and throw your own needs aside, right? And so that will slowly start to decline your own performance because your own personal needs aren't being met. But for this, it's really just important to, one, have good boundaries, right? And I'm currently reading a book by Henry Cloud called Boundaries, that a professional coach has given me to help me kind of learn, what is actually my responsibility and when is it okay to say no. And then, because we've all had those times when the restaurant, we call the restaurant the beast in LDP, right? Because the restaurant will take and take and take and take, and it's very unforgiving. And so if you don't set that boundary at the restaurant, it will take everything that it can get from you, right? You're married to your wife or you're married to your husband. You're not married to the restaurant, right? So that's really important. Really important just to kind of like first and foremost set that boundary. And then two, don't treat everything as a urgent and needs to happen now moment. I'm a leader. I love to help and to serve my team, and I love to help and to serve my wife, right? So if my team comes up and asks me to do something, like, bam, like my first gut instinct is to hop up there and do it, right? But that's not always the right decision to do, because sometimes it's really important to work on yourself, right? And so that's kind of why I would encourage anyone who's either in LDP or going into LDP to really get an outside professional coach, right? Because once you're in LDP, it is so hard to think ahead of trying to develop operator skills of, hey, when I get to a restaurant, like this is the training program that I'm going to have. Because a lot of times, in the situations that we're given in LDP, you don't have time to come up with a nice elaborate training program. You're just trying to get warm bodies in the restaurant, and you teach them the basics, and you're just like, all right, cool, like they're sufficient, and I kind of order taken, I'm moving on to the next person, right? You're just like putting out fires constantly, right? So this is what I would highly recommend, is getting that person that'll help you to take your mental state out of your current assignment and to allow you to develop yourself in the way that you're, quite frankly, or at least I wasn't able to pull myself out of, to develop myself in the professional manner that I needed to be.
No, I love that. I really appreciate the last part, because I guess if we're here on a TPE event, it's one of the things that, coming to, we have the pleasure and the honor of coaching a few people who are currently in the program, and we recognize that as a sticking point You know, it's like you're thrown into the program, you're dealing with a food safety score of $12 million in volume, needing to hire 150 employees. How much time are you thinking about that piece? So I love that you say that, because I do believe that people need to solicit the help of a coach to be able to do that. One piggyback question I wanted to ask on this, and I don't know if you have an answer for it, but I know you're going from assignment to assignment, and a lot of this Lead Better is focused on like building family. What are one or two things that you and your family did to build community for y'all selves personally while you were at assignment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first and foremost, church is a big one for us, right? So our church is we're kind of fortunate. Our church is kind of across the United States. No matter where we go, we know there's a church that we can go to. So we try our, Sundays are dedicated to church and, family time. So we know we go and serve the church and whatnot. And two, just whatever assignment we go to, my wife and I try to find some adventures to go on, right? It's like, when we were in Chicago and we didn't have a car because we weren't allowed to have a car at the time, so we walked everywhere. We did a lot of exploring, right? So especially my wife, when I was at the restaurant, there's a lot of cool trails you could find, or places to see and things to do. And it's really just that was a piece of advice that a participant that I asked about before joining LDP, and he had a wife and kids. He said to treat the program like an adventure, because that'll help kind of keep some of the stress, the stresses that you'll feel, living in tight quarters, either in hotels, or if you have the pleasure of living in corporate housing, in some corporate housing apartments. But it's not home, right? And you'll feel it. Like the longer you're in the program, the more that you'll feel a little unsettled, right, in that aspect, right? So just treating everything like an adventure, trying to go out and make those memories, right? We actually have someone, and our leadership team in LDP is actually very good at encouraging this. So if they visit the store, so a famous person in LDP, her name is Amy Odie. She's one of our launch leadership. And if she visits your store, she'll ask you, what local restaurant have you and your family been to, right? Not a chain, like, what local restaurant have you been to, right? And if you answer like, hey, I haven't been to a local restaurant, then she'll say you haven't been spending enough time in the community to find one, right? Or you've been spending too much time in the restaurant. Obviously, like if you're in triage site, you can make the business case, right? It's like, obviously I'm not going to local restaurants when I'm working 78 hours a week. I'm coming home and taking a shower and going to bed. Right. But that's what I would recommend, just really, make the most of it, right? Like, you understand, like, going in LDP, like, your life is it almost kind of feels like a giant business trip that just doesn't seem like it ever ends. And you just gotta have to make the most of it. There's like I said, there's some places are more fun than others. But it's just trying to find, what you enjoy and try to find new things to do. Yeah.
I love that. And so I think this next question, I think you've answered in multiple iterations, but I want to ask the question directly because I think it's very important. And I'll preface this question by saying, I feel like there's a lot of people who look at the idea of becoming an operator as like, hey, I'm a franchise owner. And I think there's this idea of what that is. But I want to ask you the question of what has the role of grit has played for you as an LDP participant in getting from where you are currently to where you
I would say it plays a huge role, right? So if I was going to break down grit, I would kind of choose a few different words to describe grit. And one of those isn't actually included in like the dictionary for grit. So like, there's passion and perseverance. And I'm going to throw in patience with that, right? So in LDP, you're in the very beginning when you're training and you're meeting with your development coach. They're called your program lead. You focus heavily on your why. Like, what is your why in becoming an operator? What is your why in life? Kind of like, what's your purpose, right? Or when you're going into LDP, like beginning with the end in mind. Right. And so like it's kind of big, heavy training into that because that's what's going to keep you grounded when you get into these super stressful environments. And I would encourage you to, with that grit, because it takes grit to hold on to that why, right? So it's like when you, like, for instance, Roswell Corners, it's almost like you're hanging on to this pole that is not going to move from the ground, but you're in the middle of a tornado. And you just got to hold on to it. And all you can do is, you can't even really focus on the rod because you're focusing on everything else around you, but you just got to grip on for dear life and wait for the storm to pass, right? Sometimes that's what is required of you at the time. And I would say a lot of patience too, because the corporate world does not move nearly as fast as the restaurant world. It just doesn't. My interview process of getting into the coop took a little over a year. Right. So, and that was just getting into the coop. That's not even for waiting for restaurants to pop up and interviewing for restaurants. Right. And you actually have to wait a year before you can apply to the coop. Right. So there's like 2 years of your time. That's 2 years in LDP that you're just now being able to start applying to restaurants. Right. And just no, that's why I added patience in there, because sometimes having grit is being patient and knowing, hey, like, this is not in my control, and I can't put that much time and energy into something that I can't control, right? So sometimes, like, especially for a personality like me, like, I like to stress about things that I can't control, right? It takes a lot of grit to be able to not focus on that and to focus on, like, actually what needs to be done, right? And that's either with your family or with the restaurant or with your professional development.
No, I love that. I love the addition of patience and grit. I think Chick-fil-A is such a unique opportunity where there's such high volume for what people commonly think is something simple. And so I think there's a certain level of complexity. I know you applied the word patience in a different way than I'm saying it, but I think for me it's that having the patience to be able to do these processes over and over again at a very high level with people who may not see it or understand the gravity of what you're trying to get accomplished. And so I think in persevering in grit, you got to have patience to be able to do that. So I love the addition of that thought in this. And so and I love the fact that you guys are adding questions in. Thank you, Giovanna, for that note. But keep putting good questions in. We will get to those questions at the end of this session. But I got a couple more questions for you, Bryan, if you're still up to it.
That's good. Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like to me that you've been in situations where there has been a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving situations, like a revolving door of things. What is one lesson that you learned about leading others when everything around you is shifting?
So one lesson that I've learned by leading others while everything else is shifting, I would say that a key word for me is consistency, right? Because different situations require different parts of yourself, but it's important to be consistent. And, so when you're leading others through the chaos that ensues in some of these restaurants, or even honestly in times, like, one of my hardest assignments wasn't even a busy assignment. It was a mall that did about $2,000 a day, right? And so for those of you from, not malls, that's very hard for you to imagine, because you're like, holy smokes, that's what I do in an hour. You're telling me that's a whole business day, right?
30 minutes sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes it's, how do you lead others when things around you aren't shifting? And, you have those two different environments, right? And so it's being consistent. What are your values? What do you hold important? And are you sticking to that no matter what, right? Sure, how you respond to situations will be different, right? How I responded to the $12 million restaurant with a food safety score of an 8 is going to be different than how I respond to Roswell Corners and being severely short-staffed for 2 months. And that's going to be different than how I respond to a mall doing $1,500 a day, right? But what I hold important to me and how I lead others shouldn't change, right? But how I respond to those situations do change.
No, love that. And so I've got 2 more questions for you, and then we'll get to Q&A.
I literally thought, Brian, before you said anything, because I saw you thinking about it, I was like, in my brain, it was be the constant. Like when you're the top leader, you have to be the constant, not the question mark.
Right.
You know, and have like question marks coming in a lot of the time. You know, they're ones who, you know, you don't know that day if they're going to be a 10 or a 1. And so I think really great leaders in shifting times, like if you can be the constant for your team, if you just show up constant, like in the best possible version of you. And I was even thinking when you were talking about like, you know, the 3 buckets that you were talking about, I hear people talk about like, I want work-life balance. And I'm like, that doesn't exist. It's called life balance. It's called life balance. And there's different seasons where like you're gonna have more time to focus on your personal growth, and you're gonna have more time, you know, to focus on your family, and you're gonna have more time. I mean, I think we heard that from Godwin when he's also an LDP, was just like, he's like, you have to know what season you're in, and that's where your priorities have to come from. And so, but I think you always have to just be the constant as the top leader in the business. Right. But this is not my show, so y'all just keep going.
No. You did.
I was like, he's gonna say be the constant, and you did it.
No, I love that. No, very good commentary there. And as we come to a close, again, this is the second to the last question. What advice would you give someone just entering LDP or considering applying?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have 2 pieces of advice for so one for current LDP participants. So I actually asked this question to someone who used to be in charge of selecting operators in the Southeast region of how LDPs can be more competitive in the coop. And so kind of wish I did this, kind of wish I knew about this 2 years ago, because I would have started this exercise 2 years ago. But so at the end of each assignment, I would really encourage you to answer these 3 questions. 1, what did you do in that restaurant and why? For examples, you know, what was your food cost? Do you know where the money's going? You know, what did you do? You know, what was the situations around it, right? 2, if you were to go back and restart that restaurant and that assignment, what would you do differently and why, right? And then 3, if you're the operator of that restaurant, how would you steer that restaurant towards profitability, right? You know, believe it or not, a lot of people in selection don't really realize the complexities that are around LDPs. So it's really important to be able to answer these 3 questions to give some clarity to those people, and to show also that, hey, like, yes, I do have some constraints, but, you know, if I was the operator, like, these would be the decisions that I would make. And, you know, as LDPs, we tend to think more surface level, because that's about all we have the capacity to do sometimes. You know, hey, food costs, labor, you know, staffing, right? Like, is the restaurant fixed up? Boom. You know, that's our job as interim managers, is to get the restaurant up and ready to be profitable for the next operator coming in. The second piece that I would give you, and this is a bit of advice that I'm trying to follow myself, is lean into you, right? Don't forget about yourself during your LDP journey. It's so easy to forget about yourself. And you think that's kind of weird. You're like, well, like, I'm in LDP and I'm experiencing the restaurant and I'm pushing towards the coop, but that doesn't mean that you're working on you. You're letting the restaurant work on you, right? So that's kind of where like TPE and other professional coaches come in hand, right? Because what you learn in LDP isn't enough to get you to the operator route, right? It's just not. Yes, like, does it give you a lot of experience? Sure, but it doesn't get you there, right? There's so much more to leading a small business than, you know, staffing and fixing and, you know, bulldozing a restaurant for 3 to 5 months, right? Because that's kind of just what we're doing. And so learn to set those boundaries and learn to really like develop yourself into a leader who's capable of running a multi-million-dollar restaurant.
No, I love that you highlight that, because I think one of the greatest strengths, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the greatest strengths and attributes of the LDP program itself is it gives you the luxury of seeing real life situations apart from your home restaurant. You know, I think that you grow up in a restaurant, you get a chance to see and work with those people that you're comfortable with. LDP gives you a fresh look. It's almost like you get to refresh the browser every 3 to 6 months on your situation and what's going on. But I would have to agree with you. It's like if you're not looking for outsourcing that development in some form, whether it's formally through a coach or you have your own system that, hey, I'm reading these books or I'm listening to these podcasts, like you have to have something to continue to sharpen the blade of becoming an entrepreneur. And so I love that you bring it up. And here's the final question before we go into LDP and Q&A. Before we go into Q&A, complete this sentence. Thriving through the pivot means.
Gotcha. Now I'm going to read this because I actually wrote something out for this one. This one was one that provoked a lot of thought for me that I had to really think about. So thriving through the pivot means choosing to see every moment, especially the hard ones, as a learning opportunity designed to grow and refine you. There were times during my LDP journey when the restaurant quite literally took everything I had. We were severely short-staffed, and I found myself doing multiple roles at once, leading the team, running the kitchen, cleaning the dining room, just trying to keep the store afloat. In those moments, it didn't feel like I was thriving. It felt exhausting and honestly overwhelming. What I've learned is that thriving doesn't always look like winning or being in control. Sometimes it looks like showing up, staying present, and leading through the chaos, even when it costs you something. Looking back, I realized those seasons were for my good. They taught me endurance, empathy, and how to lead with humility. They prepared me for challenges I didn't know were coming. So for me, thriving through the pivot means being willing to grow through the stretch, to trust the process, and to believe that even the hardest moments are shaping me into a better leader.
I love that. That was a phenomenal response. And honestly, in my opinion, I don't know how everybody else feels. This is a great interview. I really enjoyed your transparency. I really enjoyed your candidness in our conversation. Thank you so much, Bryan. Now we're going to transition into Q&A. I don't know. Usually we have this teed up a little bit better than this, but either Ashley or Neff, will one of you guys take over facilitating those questions? We got a bunch of great questions in there. I don't know if you can see those, Bryan, on your end on the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking at them.
It's a lot there.
I'm gonna start. Neff's gonna take over, but he said he's got to move his screen so he can see it.
Okay.
Okay. So first one was from Quentin. What was the most impactful or crucial from having an LDP launch program from within your store?
So just to clarify the question, like from the LDP launch program at my home restaurant, what was the most impactful? Like, what was like the most impactful moment from that? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Honestly, the most impactful part of that launch program was actually having a professional coach in the that taught me from the restaurant. So he was a coach that my operator hires once we get to a point where we've reached a lot of operational experience. We're not a lot of more operational experience is required for LDP. And then they're really honing us in on the ability to interview, right? Because being able to do something is a lot different than being able to say something. And especially being able to say it in corporate terms to people who haven't been in the restaurant before, right? So it's just being able to like speak clearly. So that to me was the most impactful because I was blessed to have been able to get through LDP through one round of interviews. So I never got rejected. So I was very grateful for that. But that to me was probably the most impactful part of that launch program was having that outside coach to help me with interviewing.
All right, Bryan, taking over now. So next question comes from Nathan. How do you balance humility with the confidence it takes to declare your end goal of becoming an owner operator?
That's a great question. And I think you can, being a confident leader doesn't mean that you can't be a humble leader, right? Because when selection asks you, like, hey, what are your accomplishments, right? Like, these are your accomplishments, right? Like, I can say, hey, I led my team to a food safety 2, right? But here's how I did it, right? I was able to give that responsibility to leaders that I trusted who then implemented food safety systems and I just ensured that those systems were being met, right? It's like I'm still giving the credit towards the people who like worked their butt off, quite frankly, to get those scores. But it was still, my restaurant and the leadership that I provided that helped to get those. So I think, you could still spend, it's kind of like a humble confidence. That's kind of how I like to, how I like to put it. It's that confidence with a dose of humility. Because and at the end, like your name is what's on the restaurant or on the FCR if you're that lead interim manager, and those are your results, right? Like even if you focused on that part of the restaurant or not, like everything is a consequence, good or bad, of the leadership that you provided at that restaurant.
I think a good resource for anybody wanting to know more about this, The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. Talks about hungry, humble, smart. You got to have all three as a leader, and it makes you well-rounded. You can't just have confidence, not humility. You got to have humility, and you got to have confidence to be able to drive those results. So thank you, Bryan. And then we're going to a question with Shannon. She said, when you are in LDP, then enter the coop, do you continue to travel with LDP, or do you transition to work permanently in a Chick-fil-A location until you're selected for your own opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's actually completely up to you. So you're minimally required to be an LDP unless selected as an operator beforehand for 2 years. Right, that's the minimal requirement. After 2 years, whether you're in the coop or you're not in the coop, you can choose to exit the program to work with another operator, to work with another business, or to continue to work with LDP. So I'm in the coop right now, and I'm still traveling with LDP. So my wife and I are actually looking potentially for some other opportunities, either with local operators or a potential more long-standing assignment opportunity called LDP Plus within LDP. It's a great question.
Thank you. And Marina, I do see your comment. It is The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. All right, going to Quentin. Quentin, he said, you mentioned the book Boundaries, but are there any other books or podcasts that you feel that impacted you professionally or personally as you've been on your journey?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Quentin. I'm not the best example when it comes to listening to professional podcasts or reading books. That is where my professional coaches come in, because I do not take time out of my day to read books when my life is either my restaurant or my kids and my wife. So that coach has been the one who's really been helping me to actually carve time out of my day to read those books. But to answer that question, being on the Chick-fil-A journey, it's really important to choose a couple of Truett Cathy books to read, to be quite frank with you, even if you want, the main couple, because they're going to ask you about those in the selection interviews, right? They're going to ask you what Truett Cathy books have you read? So I would just encourage you just to go ahead and just pick one or two of them, and read them. So none in particular. They don't really expand on them. They just ask you if you've read them and what they're about.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryan. And we got one last question from your friend Roderick. He said, how have you grown as a business leader apart from a restaurant leader in your pursuit of becoming an operator?
Appreciate that one, Roderick. This one, I feel like the most, growth in this area has come when I've talked with operators in the areas that I've served. So I would highly encourage you, as you go about in your LDP journey, to meet the operators around you, right? Because a lot of them have been with Chick-fil-A for a long time and can provide a lot of valuable experience. A lot of them are great community leaders. Like the operator David Chalou, I would transition his restaurant at Deerbrook Mall. He's now in a DTO in Spring. It's either Spring or Spring Cypress. I apologize. Don't get mad at me for not really knowing that one. He described his role at Deerbrook Mall as being the mayor of the mall, right? It's like his community was the mall and he was the mayor. right? And I really liked how he viewed that, right? Because his responsibility wasn't just the restaurant; it was, you know, the 100 some odd stores that was in the mall, right? When you're like, so that makes me think, you know, when I'm an operator, you know, I want to be the servant, like the servant standard of my community, right? Like the community is going to look to me and knowing how to serve people, right? Um, and so that's just like really important. That's what I would really encourage you to do. You know, if you really want to grow as a business leader, then you need to go talk with successful business leaders on how they got there, because that will help open your eyes in ways that you like the restaurant's just not going to help you with.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. I think that concludes our Q&A for this call. Alex?
All right. Thank you so much, Neff, for facilitating that. Neff and Giovanna, I appreciate it. I don't. Do we have any other questions before we transition into the next segment of this? Brian, you have been incredible. Thank you so much. And the only people who are going to really know about that spring Texas snafu is us, so it's okay. No big deal. no problem on that, you know, because that's where we live. But no, I've really enjoyed your candid conversation. I think you've given us a lot to think about as it relates to how to travel with family. What do boundaries look like? What buckets should we consider in our lives? I appreciate the resources that you've given. I really, really appreciate the endorsement of using a professional coach. And I think that's going to segue us into our next piece. Please hang tight for us, Brian. If you got a few more moments, I would love to get with you at the end of this. But so at this time, we'll like to talk about what we do here at TPE. And now that you've made it this far and Lead Better, there is a special offer for you guys who have participated. But before we do that, I want to let you guys know, if you go to your app store, if you have an Android or an Apple device, iPhone, you can go there and download the TPE Leadership app. And join our exclusive community called Leaders Square. We're about 200 leaders strong there. And we would love to see you join that group. We have exclusive content there in Leaders Square, where a lot of us who are coaches are contributing there. Actually, these Lead Better replays will live in Leaders Square exclusively before they go out to the general public, in terms of on our YouTube channel and on our podcast channel. And so download the TPE Leadership app. Just search that exactly in your app store, and you'll be able to get connected with us and get closer to what we're doing here at TPE. Now, for you guys who have joined this and said, you know, I think Brian has said this several times, and I'm not just saying this because we run a company here of coaching, but he has mentioned the necessity and what role as a professional coach has played in his life, even before getting into LDP. If I heard that correctly, I think your operators, had a professional coach during the journey that you were taking as getting into this. And so for those of you who are thinking about getting into LDP and you wanting to partner with a coaching company that has proven themselves to have success in this area, I want to say Giovanna's about 4 for 4, 5 for 5 now for the clients that she's worked with. She has I don't want to jinx it. She has 100% success rate so far in helping the leaders that have been partnering with her to get from the point that they want to where they are now. We have several great reviews from operators that we're working with their leaders about the things that we're doing for them and the results that they're seeing in their business. As I said at the top of this broadcast, we have over 60 years of not only just previous Chick-fil-A experience or restaurant experience, but ongoing restaurant experience. And I believe that's one of the competitive advantages that we have, because we speak the language, we understand what you're going through. We understand that when the pineapple dragon fruit came out and there were shortages, we can empathize with you on that, because we're seeing some of these things happen in real time right there with you. And so if you would, if you go to the same website that you went to book this event, there is a tab that says Discovery Call. And if you book your discovery call within the next 48 hours, now that does not mean we need to have this discovery call within 48 hours. You just need to schedule it within the next 48 hours. And then you'll be able to get a free month of coaching with us. A free month of coaching translates into 2 sessions with one of the coaches that I feel would best serve your needs. And so if you want to take advantage of that offer, please go over to www.tpenow.com. Use the, I guess people call it the hamburger menu icon, and select the discovery call under bookings, and then we'll love to get connected with you. We have so many new faces on the line. This is very encouraging to see so many people from across the country here with us today. Again, Bryan, thank you so much for being a faithful steward and pouring into not only the people who are pursuing LDP, but also in the lives of us. I'm sure every coach here has been inspired to continue to do better and serve the brands that we've all signed up to serve. And so if there's nothing else, guys, audience, you guys are free to go unless there's any other questions that you guys have for myself or any other coaches or Bryan.
Hey guys, what's up? It's your friend, Pastor John R. Adolph from the Antioch Church in Beaumont, Texas. And I just want to slip this in right quick so you'll never forget. It's all about progress over perfection here at TPE.
Tap into the Pivot Experience, where we help young, hungry entrepreneurs move on to the next step.